All right, folks, thank you everyone for joining us today in today's webinar on the second prong approach regarding youth contracts. Today we're going to have Wendy Schiller, Jessica Pierce, and Doug Thomas presenting for us. Before we get started, we just want to point out that any points of views or opinions expressed in this webinar are those of the presenters and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of OJJDP or the U.S. Department of Justice. Wendy?
Thank you, Elo. So just to get us started, I just wanted to think about the purpose of the webinar today. This is a little bit different from putting up learning objectives. I'm trying to get to purposes or objectives that are really audience-centered, and so this is the way I thought about it, this sort of shift for juvenile drug courts from the thinking about predetermined phases or enforcing court orders to really understanding the power of using quality case management strategies. So that's going to be our purpose going forward. So with that, let's get familiar with Adobe Connect tools really quickly. We'd like to start this off with each of the webinars just so everybody understands what we're doing. As a group, let me know how you're here. As a group, if you could come up and select the status. If you're here as a group, use the check mark, the agree check mark. If you're here as an individual, use the raised hand. If you could see, it's right up here with that little guy raising his hand. Everyone seems to be putting it in pretty quickly. And maybe just shoot me a hello in chat, just so I know where everybody, if everybody knows where chat is. The chat box is down here at the corner, your bottom right. Hello. So those are some of the tools we're going to be using as we move forward. If you've been on a webinar with us before, you know that we like to engage you in this system and get everybody interested in the tools that we have. So we'll be using these and also using the poll questions because we love taking polls. So with that, the first poll question. How many of you attended the Most Valued Privilege webinar, the one that was just held last week, where we just focused on the first prong? So it looks like majority coming in. Few no's, didn't participate in the first prong. We'll have enough background to cover the different components. So going back to our purpose of, the audience-centered purpose of how I thought about what we were doing here, I want to get to, so why are we here? And it really goes to, behavior change. We're sort of learning about these new, the new way we're doing incentives and sanctions, the incentives and sanctions 2.0, and that we keep talking about, making sure that we're being very fair, immediate, consistent, individualized, and having a 4-to-1 ratio. And this is sort of the theory and research that we have behind behavior change. And now we're putting together really concrete structures to sort of force us to do these things, because we found in the past that it's a little bit easier to say this than it is to actually do this. So that's what the three-prong approach is all about, really getting us to set some concrete procedures that will help us make really good responses that are concrete, transparent, fair, and also with the the three-prong approach, we have the ability to monitor and then analyze the data that we're getting from having such a structured process in place. So no longer will we be just wondering, are we meeting a 4-to-1 ratio? We'll actually be able to know. No longer will we be wondering if youth are making progress in the direction that we want them to. We'll be able to know by using some of these new tactics, so to speak, helping us move along this process. So this structured approach is what we're moving towards. And today, we're really focusing on the second prong. So if you were in the first webinar, we went through each of the 3 prongs pretty briefly. They're stated here. I've highlighted the second prong because that's what we're going to focus on today. We're learning how to develop individualized contracts to reward and motivate positive behavior change in other areas like school attendance, family connectedness, community involvement. This is really helping us put some structures in place to help us understand progress and highlight progress. So I want to point out, because I am noticing on chat, even though I'm not supposed to be noticing on chat, Jessica just put the link for the other, the recorded webinars. So if you feel like you're missing out on the big picture, don't worry, you can go back and look. So behavior contracts, since that's our focus today, let me see what you guys think about them. If you've used them before, maybe you understand why we should use them, maybe without even knowing a lot about them. Why do you think we should use behavior contracts? If you could just go ahead and write in chat, just give me some reasons why we would do this. Why are we attempting to make this a part of our framework now? Why isn't just enforcing court orders good enough? Hold the kid accountable. Wow, they're coming in so fast. Get everyone on the same page, buy-in from participants. These are really great comments. Allow kids to have some control. I think that's an excellent comment. A lot of holding the kids accountable. Motivate on a weekly basis. So we already got someone talking about time frames. That's really good. Yeah, and measure success. Break down large goals into easy to follow steps. That's great. Yeah, I think that's exactly why we're going to do it. And again, I think it boils down to how easy is it to do that? Is it easier said than done? And there's a lot of parts of this that we just take for granted, that we just know. And I want to just kind of step back just a little bit because I think I use a lot of words generally when I'm describing contracts. So maybe I say an individual contract, or maybe I say behavior or a youth contract. You'll see warning contract up there, which sort of conjures up in your mind a different meaning. We spoke a little bit about, or a lot about this during the Most Valued Privilege webinar, where we're talking about an increased response, which sort of connects to a warning contract. Today we're going to focus really on individual contracts or youth contracts, behavior contracts, where we're thinking of just setting some processes in place that can hold the youth accountable and hold the team accountable, really. But I just want to go over just sort of all the terms sort of floating around about it, and just get to, maybe we're all sort of saying the same thing, but the main point is that we put these, just a contract in place that is clear and transparent. So what do we use these for? If we are implementing the second prong of the three-prong approach, which is implementing contracts, we should have a reason for doing it. So some of the reasons here, target a specific behavior, so you can actually take this behavior like school attendance and break it down. What are some goals that we can do or objectives that we can do to get us through this. A step-by-step process for the youth to follow, get the youth working towards things that they're interested in, or like I said before, with a warning contract and increased response for noncompliance. What we're really going to focus on is that step-by-step process. What does that really mean? They're really good at some of this. That's one of the really good things about a contract, is that it's the step-by-step process. It's like having a to-do list or a planner, and that's a thing. That's something adults continue to do throughout their lives. Some of us are really good at it. Some of us need a little extra help, which is why daily planners and to-do lists are a thing. And actually, when I was looking up some videos to share with everybody today, I found out just what a thing it is. So there's all these just tons and tons of videos on YouTube, how to make a successful to-do list, how to stay organized inside my planner, 10 ways to personalize your planner. I stumbled across these. The videos they range from 15 minutes to 40 minutes. It's in great detail in how to organize a planner, how to stay organized, how to personalize it. I teased out a few and just put them up on the screen here, and you can see I added how many views they get. So this is the thing. People are interested in this. They want to increase their understanding because we plan. And if we plan well, we can achieve goals. And like I said, some of us are natural at this, but we really should be teaching our kids how to do it. Not even just the kids that we have that we're working with in the court system, but we probably are teaching our kids to do this. I just want to share one of them with you, just so you can get, just so you can have fun viewing it, because I found them so interesting. Ello, can I get you to pull up that video? And just a reminder, the sound will come out of your computers for this.
Hey Fowlfaxers, thanks for coming to watch another video today. This video is going to be all about to-do lists. So for me, to-do lists have always been a part of my life. I just recently kind of came across a system that I think is really going to help me, and I think is going to keep me more organized and on track. There's different ways to do your to-do list, so I'm going to give you a few options, but this to-do list is going to be based off of a system that I came across. Like I said, I came across it and kind of adapted it to my own needs, and so I hope you find it interesting. So first, let's talk about where you could put your to-do list. For me, I tend to put my to-do lists on my pages for the day, and the thing is that works perfectly. As you can see, this is today's. I haven't gone and checked off much of anything yet, but this was yesterday's, and I checked off a few things, took a few notes there, and this was the day before. It didn't have much to do. I think it was, oh yeah, that's Monday, and this was the beginning of the week. So some people like to put their to-do list here, and that is great. I would say keep it there if that's what works for you, but I think there should be a master to-do list, and for me, I was keeping it here.
So I spent quite a bit of time yesterday looking at a lot of those, and what I found most interesting is the way all the presenters in the YouTube videos were really personalizing it, making it individualized. It was things that we do for a lot of the for things when we're planning a wedding, we're planning to go on vacation, we're just things that we need to do for the week. They're prioritizing. They're making a master list with smaller lists. So a lot of the things were very much the same, and it's just got me thinking about this is what we're doing when we're working with kids and putting a behavior or a youth contract together. We're creating a to-do list for them. And this is a skill that they could learn and use later in life because at some level, we're all doing this. So some of us are very structured in putting this in place. Others, it's haphazard, and they have sticky notes all over, and maybe they're not so organized. But it's something that we're doing, even if it's just kept in our heads. We're keeping track of this stuff. But for the kids, we need to be their external brain and really help them think it through. Because without it, it's just a dream. It's just this idea out there. Because if we don't have a deadline, if we can't measure it, it's just this thing floating out there that we don't know if it's done. We don't know if we did a good job. We don't know if we got where we needed to go. So with that, let's take a look at what I kind of mean by this. This is an example of a contract. This is what I take with me when I'm going on site and working with juvenile drug court teams. And when I'm on site, I typically have teams put these together based on a kid that they're working with in their court. So this is an example. So you can see the thing that we want to have happen is for this kid to finish 3 lesson plans in their credit recovery class. And we've sort of broken out what that means because they have to do it by the next court hearing. So we figured out that they need to set aside 30 minutes every day after school. They need to find a location to work, and then they need to work on the lessons. We've mapped out what these incentives are. Of course, we're going to be giving them praise. If you have a point-level reward system, you can attach points to this, which is a great way to have an incentive, especially if your points are tied to phase movement. You can attach, you can make a deal with them that you'll extend their curfew. And obviously, the natural incentive here is they're getting closer to completing this course. You're really putting that out for them. It's very clear. You're stating what it looks like, what non-compliance looks like, which is basically failure to complete these lessons. And then you're talking about, well, this is what happens. This is what will happen if you don't. You won't earn the points. And in fact, because you didn't use your time wisely, I'm going to have to reduce your curfew. You're going to want to make sure the sanction is very tied to what you're trying to do. So not a sanction out of left field that doesn't make much sense, but something, hey, obviously you weren't using your time wisely this week. We're going to have to talk about your curfew. And then think about all the things that they might need help with to actually accomplish this task, because one of the important things to keep in mind is, are these attainable goals? Can this get done? So do they need some tutoring assistance? Do they actually need some help completing these lessons, or is it something they can just do on their own? Do they need use of a computer? Do you have to set something up there at the office, the case manager's office, or at the court? Is that something that can be done? And then a further support would be, how about checking in midweek? Because you know that this goal has to be accomplished. How about check in and determine the status? What's the progress? Do they have 1.5 done? If they did, we got some progress on this goal. If they have 0 lesson plans done, we don't have very much progress. So maybe we have to go, oh, well, you can't set aside 30 minutes now. You're going to have to set aside an hour to get this done in time. So you're doing that check-in because what the contract is going to do is, of course, hold that youth accountable, but it's also going to hold the team and the case manager are accountable as well, because it's in their best interest to help the youth get this done. And since it's very structured, that becomes a little bit easier. You can see it's signed by the youth, signed by the caregiver, signed by the case manager. So we're all responsible for getting this completed. So this is a pretty good example of what you would want the youth and the youth to go through to sort of figure out what would happen. A couple things you'll keep in mind is you don't want in this particular one it to be super long. You don't want to say in 3 months you'll get you'll get the whole recovery credit class done. That's a little long. Let's take it down a notch and put these into really bite-sized chunks so that they're always moving forward, and you can celebrate those successes early and often. So that's sort of my recommendation for putting that together. So Jess, I see that there's a lot of stuff going on in chat, which is pretty normal for this group. In every webinar, we have a lot of chat going on, which is fantastic because everybody's asking really great questions. So anything of interest?
Yeah, so actually Colette and I have been having a really interesting conversation because they actually are using behavior contracts. What they're running into is that the youth don't necessarily want to agree to the sanctions that they don't want. And so she's asking, should they be allowed to make up or agree to the sanction? And so my response is, you know, as much voice as we can give kids in the process, the more they're going to buy in. And so I think the case manager, the JPO, can work with the young person to kind of come to an agreement. I don't think that if they say, well, I think my sanction should be to eat a candy bar, I don't think we sign off on that, right? Because we're the adults in that situation. We can be like, yeah, pull the other leg there, friend. That's not going to happen. But you can negotiate. So I always like it when case managers, JPOs, treatment, the judge, anybody asks the kid, well, what do you think is appropriate here? What do you think our response should be? And sometimes you'll get a flippant answer, but I think you can use that to work towards something that makes sense for the young person and his or her family. Always, though, thinking about where we can give them a voice.
Right. I think that's exactly right, Jess. And of course, we're going to be, you know, we're the adults in the room, and we have to try to connect it to what we're trying to do. So in my example there, well, I know you are offering this other sanction, but really, so maybe the sanction is community service. But that sanction doesn't really seem to be working. And so the case manager can say, well, I really don't think that you're using your time well, and the curfew is what I think you want more, and I'm going to put that in place. And thank you for your input. But and you could have a list of 3. You know what's great about this, though, Jess, is you know, after 2 weeks of trying to get progress on this, I think you can be pretty certain that that sanction doesn't work because you have this data telling you that it's not, because there's no progress on the goal. So then you can say, well, you had your choice. Now we have to do something else.
And I think that speaks to Colette's second point here, which is
Right.
like, you know, in some cases you try to manipulate the system by saying things like, oh, yeah, it'd be the worst thing in the world if you know, sent me to home for the whole day where my Xbox is, you know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, of course sometimes kids are going to try to manipulate the system. But, again, that's why we give them a chance. And if it doesn't work out, again, still the grown-ups, still the people who say, no, you had your choice. That didn't work out. Now we're going to try it our way.
Right. And so, that's the importance of having this data. What I like about it is that it really reduces the noise or the chatter that goes around sort of when you're discussing what we're going to do with youth. So in pre-court staffing, or maybe even in court, where we're sort of trying to figure out what's happening, what we need to get them to do, we we're talking about things that are relevant, and we need to keep it relevant. And a youth contract that's in place keeps it relevant. You'll be talking about this goal, progress on it, whether or not they made it. Things are already in place and determined so you can move forward. So I think it really reduces sort of that chatter, that sort of indecision that comes along without having the structure in place. I am reminded of how Michigan, the court using this at one point when I went out there to train, they filled it out with a kid in mind, like I generally instruct teams to do. And they had a particular young woman who every week they would ask, did you get your birth certificate? So for whatever reason, she didn't have her birth certificate. They really needed her to get one. But every week she would come to court. The judge or the team would ask, did you get it? No. And there would always be, not a terrible excuse, but one anyway. And then I came and I trained and we did some work on behavior contracts, and they put that in place, and lo and behold, the next week the kid got her birth certificate. I mean, and some of the objectives were so detailed, which was call this number on Monday, do this after that. So they really just took that fuzziness away from getting that birth certificate. And that might be a level of detail that some of us may not need, but there are some of us who need that level of detail. And so that's what that's what you should be speaking to. So all of this information, again, it boils down to how easy is this to do? All these things, I mean, you can tell by the chat talking and questions that surround this. It's easier said than done, just like implementing incentives and sanctions. It's easier said than done. So that's why I decided to bring in a guest speaker, and that's Doug Thomas. Actually, in February, he came on a site visit for me, and I figured out he has this treasure trove of case planning activities and resources that can really help JDC teams better understand this process and how to do it effectively. So I'm just going to turn it over to him, and I just want to tell everyone, this is exactly what he looks like. That's a picture. Go ahead, Doug.
Well, that's what I looked like before I gained a little bit of weight. I look much better now, filled out. I just want you to know. Yeah, thanks a lot. And this is actually one of those things I spend a lot of time. First of all, I'm Doug Thomas. I'm actually here in Pittsburgh, a couple offices away from where Wendy is sitting right now. And I'm also work for the National Council for Juvenile Family Court Judges. I work on the research arm of the National Center for Juvenile Justice. We're located here in Pittsburgh. And part of my career, a lot of my career has been spent working with probation and courts. And a lot of that has been trying to help probation officers and judges and courts to have a sort of more structured way of trying to achieve goals. And one of those ways is through a case planning process. And so basically we're talking about a structured way to achieve goals for the kids that are on your caseloads. I just wanted to, before we go too far into this, find out how many of you are familiar with the SMART acronym, if you've had training in this, if it's something that makes sense. But have you heard of SMART, goals? Yeah, looks like the yeses are winning, which is great. Okay, I guess is that everybody? Pretty much. The neat thing about what I like about this is because I was telling Wendy earlier today that I wish that I had come up with this acronym, because I spent many years trying to get folks to understand and use these, to be specific, to be measurable, to be attainable, to be relevant and time-based when you're trying to get people to do things. Yourselves, your children, kids on your caseloads, stuff like that. One of the things we found, though, is that when you're talking about goals, you know, well, first of all, the key to achieving goals is writing clear action statements, and that's one of those things that people seem to have a very difficult time with. Some people do. Some people are naturals at it, and they take to, like, fish to water. I am an unnatural goal writer. It's very difficult for me, which is ironic since I'm supposed to be, as a researcher, able to do that. But I've talked to other researchers and folks like that, and even people who do this for a living find it very difficult to write really specific, powerful, useful action statements. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, I just want to do some definitional, a little definitional work, because when I was in a state that's, well, it's west of California, with Wendy and part of this team. We were doing the same sort of dog and pony show, and one of the first questions that the group in Honolulu wanted to know about was, well, define a goal, define an objective. So I know you've all gone through, many of you had the SMART training, but it's good to remember those things. First of all, there's a sequence to how this works. Juvenile drug courts have a purpose. To achieve that purpose, there are several goals you're trying to do. Address substance abuse issues, protect the community, provide skill training for the kids, whatever they happen to be. So for every goal, there's one or more objectives. Now the goal is your sort of broad scale outcome you're looking for. It's not usually terribly measurable in and of itself, but it's a goal. It's like protect the community. And so for every goal, you have one or more objectives, and objectives are a lot more succinct. They're a lot more a lot clearer, and they're also measurable. So there are the stepping stones towards achieving those goals. There are the things you can see and sort of check off, I've done this, I've done this. But for every objective, there are also activities. To achieve objectives, you have to have specific activities. And as I mentioned, you also have to have, there are also expected outcomes. And this is all framed within time. It's all time, the parameters of time. You have to achieve your goals in a certain amount of time. Otherwise, nothing ever gets done. So that's the sort of the definitional part of it. But the key to this is writing these clear action statements. And I know that most of you have had a chance to SMART goals. I know that it sounds like many of you are already using case planning and strategies. So you probably know what I'm going to tell you. It's not an easy thing to do. It's actually very hard to write clear action statements. So what I want to do is just try to make it a little bit easier by diagramming, using diagramming a sentence strategy, but also to remember the components of this sentence or the statement. There's going to be an objective, there's going to be an activity, there's going to be an expected outcome, and there's going to be a time frame for achieving your writing these statements. So this is the sample objective diagram. Came to me when I was trying to pass on this information to Pennsylvania probation officers, and frankly, they just weren't getting it. It was very difficult, and it's not to say there's anything wrong with Pennsylvania probation officers. They're great. But as I said, this is a difficult thing to do. So as an example, I hearkened back to, I don't know, I can't remember. Maybe when you can chat this in, when they taught us to diagram sentences. I don't know, maybe I was in college when that happened to me. So this is the statement basically here is the action statement is to improve social interaction skills by actively participating in social communication groups, 8 out of 10 biweekly, between December 7th and December 31st of some unspecified year. And so, basically this sentence has all of the characteristics. It has an objective to improve social interaction skills. There's an activity, which is to actively participate in social communication groups. There's also a performance measure written into that. You have to attend 8 out of 10 biweekly sessions, and you have to do this sometime between December 7th and December 31st. So when you're looking at that, you can see all the component parts of an action statement. What I'd like to do is to take a little easier, well, not simple, not easier, because none of this is ever easy, but just to sort of work through collectively a process and think of a goal that all of us can relate to. And I figure that everybody that's listening to this podcast or webinar right now either has or knows someone who's tried to diet, who's tried to manage their weight. So, and this is an example I often use. So our goal that we want to consider is, weight loss. Our goal is to lose weight. As always, if you have the goal, our goal is to lose weight, so we need to come up with some objectives. And as you write in the chat, as you think about this, write in the chat what you would think the objectives would be for losing weight. And I know from fact that a doctor has told this to me just recently, that there are really just two objectives to help you lose weight. And Kevin, you're right on it. I recently went to one of my physicians, and he's talking about, all these sort of health issues, things like that. And one of the things he sort of points out is, well, Doug, you could lose a few pounds. So I said, well, I exercise. And he says, not going to do it. It's how much you eat that's most important. So you can exercise as much as you want, but if you go and eat a whole pizza after you exercise, it doesn't do any good. So it's how much you eat and how much you exercise are the two things that are going to help you lose weight, if that makes sense. Okay, so we know we have to eat less and exercise more. And for those of you out there who are the light bulbs going on saying, oh gosh, you don't have to pay me any residuals for this. This is free medical advice from a real doctor. So write in chat some of the activities that you might engage in to eat less and exercise more. Just take a few minutes to do that. And I think Elo is going to record them on the slide. Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct.
Wow.
We got multiple attendees.
I know, this is really great.
So here, join a nutrition class, meet with a dietitian, join a gym, get a partner, find a class you like.
And these are all activities, and some are related to the others. And this is exactly what happens, and what you're going to if you've done this before and you feel like you're pretty good at it, or if you're just starting off, you've never done it before. These are exactly the same types of sort of mental cognition exercises you're going to have to go through while creating your own action plans for the kids you're working with. Are these things supposed to pop up on the slide, or are we just going to move on? Because I'm timing myself, Jess and Wendy, you'd be proud of me.
They should be popping up on the slide shortly, and
okay.
We have more folks that are typing and more answers coming in.
Okay, got a lot of stuff.
They're a little bit mixed up, Doug. So there's some things that are talking about the activities under Eat Less, and some things under the activities Exercise More.
That's right, and one of the things that Wendy and I were talking about before, one of the reasons this is such a difficult skill to learn, is there are shifting sands to all of this. Sometimes, and those of you who've done this are familiar, one person's goal might be another person's objective, depending on their perspective. And as you're trying to figure out the activities, sometimes you get multiple activities, but you should try to be very specific. So for each objective, you might have one or more very specific activities. And if you feel like you're making compound sentences or mixing your activities, then it's going to make your action statements a little more confusing. But basically, we'll go through some of these, and while waiting for the slide to pop up. So if you're going to eat less, we'll start with that one. Someone said join a nutrition class, and that might be an activity that helps you understand that you can eat less because you're going to eat better. So that would be a tremendous activity for that one. Meet with a dietitian. One of the things that you want to be careful about, if you just have some open-ended things like meet with a dietitian, well, you can always meet with a dietitian, but your activity would be learn about diet by meeting with a dietitian. Same thing with join a gym for exercise more. You can always join a gym, but I've joined lots of gyms, and then all of a sudden I go there and they tell me my membership's expired. I've never been there. So it's actually go to a gym regularly. You're looking for very specific activities like that. Research your body type. That's a tremendous first step. Eat healthier carbs is very specific. Eat a bigger breakfast and smaller dinner. Eating healthier and join a gym. Walk. These are all things that you would fit under one or more of these two activities. So the point to the activities, like I was saying, is that so you're gonna lose weight, you're gonna eat less or eat better, and so the activities for that would be manage your meals, count your calories, eat just 2 meals a day, things like that. Eat a bigger breakfast, a smaller dinner that they have here, dedicate a special time of day to exercise. I would done an exercise one. So I think we sort of get the point. But for these activities, they're very specific, especially when you're working on your case plans with your kids, because you might have something in your mind, and you don't want to leave any room for interpretation, because you're going to look at this over, your kids are going to look at this over, the parents are going to look at this over, and guess what? You're all responsible for getting this done. So you don't want to have any ambiguity whatsoever in terms of what those activities are. And you also want to be able to work backwards and say, if I do these 3 things, will I actually achieve this objective? And if I achieve this objective, is it actually going to help me achieve my goal? And that's where the performance, the measuring outcomes comes in. And that said, it's incredibly important to have measures for each objective, and not only just at the end, because at the end of the day, or at the end of your time period for losing weight, you're going to say, well, I want to lose weight, and I'll just weigh myself in a week. But that's only going to work if you do everything you said you're going to do in the meantime. So you're going to be wanting to measure your progress as you go along. So we saw the woman with the planner, and she was very detailed in terms of what she was trying to do. So probably for every second of her day, she has little check boxes. I achieved this, I achieved this. The other thing, and for your plans, you're going to want to be able to do the same thing. So for the lose weight example, you're going to, on a daily basis, you'll probably want to weigh yourself. But for the objective of eating less, you might say at the end of each day, here's my caloric intake. Here's how many meals I ate. Here's a list of food I actually ate, and including the junk food, so you have to be honest with yourself. For the same thing with the exercise, you're going to say, here are the number of times I went to the gym. Here's my exercise routine. This is how long I measured. I go to a spin class with my wife, and a lot of the folks in the spin class have these monitors that I find real annoying, where they're monitoring to the second how many calories, how many minutes over their max heart rate they're exercising. This is the same type of specificity you're going to be wanting to put in your contracts with these kids.
Doug?
Yes.
I just wanted to step in here just really quickly because I wanted to actually talk about documenting interim progress. You can see here where we have sort of a Likert scale, no progress, less than expected progress, completed activity. This sort of gives you a gauge of where you could put something. So I'm going to move the slides back because I want to point this out. that right here, during this, in this support service column, when a case manager is going to check in with this kid to see where they're at, what's the status? What could happen here is that you could actually attach an interim progress. So have they made 0 progress? Are they at a 1 or are they at a 2? Or have they just banged it out and they've completed? So you can actually begin to use that immediate reinforcement by talking in that type of language. What this also serves to do is provide the team with an understanding of what progress looks like, what it means to you. So, whoops, apologize guys, went a little too far. You can say, if at pre-court staffing it didn't get done, you can say, well, we're at a 1. I had a talk with him. He still didn't complete, but there was some progress. So I think we're kind of getting somewhere. But you'll be able to know objectively where you're at. And so if you get 0, 0, 0, you know, something's wrong. Something needs to be inserted. You have to go back to the drawing board. Is this an attainable goal? Do I need to insert something here to help support this kid? So that's how you would sort of, you know, put that in place. But this part, the interim progress part, is pretty important, just as important as sort of being able to determine what's the measured completion.
You're exactly right. And I think especially for, you know, case finding for you know, for the population we work with, these interim progress reports, and especially within a drug court situation where you're meeting every week or every other week, these should be your indicators of how each individual case is going on the very specific things you're trying to do. And Wendy had mentioned earlier about the noise that you can reduce from this. So it could be that you're going down and you're seeing the progress, and the kid is making expected progress on 4 out of 5 of the goals that you're trying to achieve. And then on the 5th one, you're looking at making no progress. Well, that either means that just not doing it, refusing to do it, or it might mean that the objective itself was faulty and that the kid can't do it. And so that now what you're going to do, rather than having this sort of circular discussion of why you're not listening to us and we're going to sanction you because you're not doing what we want to do, now you're saying, why aren't you achieving this particular objective? What can we do to help you achieve this objective so we can actually meet the goal we're trying to achieve? You don't lose time like digging your heels on one small, what you might see as a behavioral diss. Now you're saying we have a larger picture and we have this roadmap we're following. So then you do your in progress adjustments, and it eliminates a lot of noise. And maybe some of you who've done this successfully can sort of chat about that and talk about that.
Hey, Wendy and Doug.
Yes.
Because I think you're confusing me a little bit. So I get the difference between proximal and distal goals. And it sounds to me like the interim progress makes more sense with those longer-term goals. When I think about this behavior contract that we're using as an example here, the completing 3 lessons over that course of that week, the interim progress of the check-in in the middle of the week is great. But what happens if that isn't done by the end of the week? I feel like they signed the contract, they knew what was going to happen, so even if they completed 1 of the 3, we still sanction then, right?
Yes. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear on that. It's just a way to sort of measure. But of course then in the midweek when you're going, you can actually give it a score. But yeah, it is sort of, it's binary. I mean, they did it or not. But it can give you some indication of, well, will I get more progress next week? Or if it's a 0 and you got 0 progress, it starts to put you down a different path thinking about, is this attainable? What's really going on here? So maybe if you're just getting 1, each time, so they're doing half of a lesson each time. I'm just grasping at an example here. They're doing something, but they're not doing all, so it's sort of like a different question. But the progress helps you make some objective decisions there.
Okay.
And I think that you could use, I mean, you're going to use these progress indicators in lots of different areas.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
that's for a long-term goal. But for a short-term goal, like that's a week long, I'm not necessarily keen on giving credit for, well, in this week you really tried and got one report done, but not all three. So
well, I mean that's an excellent point, and that's why this is all individualized, because you look at it and then you in looking over the case with the planning of the case, you say, well, you're not meeting the progress we'd expect you to achieve. We expect you to get three done, and then you have to make this decision whether that's sanction worthy, with a sort of minor sanction to give the kid a boot in the pants to get going, or if maybe there's something else going on, and if you do that for the next 6 weeks, that won't get done because maybe there is some sort of cognitive issue, or maybe there's something else going on. So it gives you a chance. You have to have sort of knee-jerk reactions to these plans because you're going over them all the time. But again, it takes out all that noise. You know exactly what you're talking about. And if a kid just comes up with a bunch of lame excuses, say, look, those are lame excuses. There's a sanction here. You're going to lose your cell phone for half a day or something like that. Whatever you can do to move the kid along. So I saw an interesting comment here. Who rates the interim progress, a client, the clinician, or is it a joint effort? And this goes back to one of the earlier questions that, in terms of who's in charge of this contract. And this also comes up a lot with court-based contracts like this. The bottom line is this is a court function. The juvenile drug court has a job to do. The kids are part of the process, but the authority rests with the juvenile drug court. It's not really a free contract you're going into where everyone's equal. You are the experts. You're the ones with the information. You're the ones that know where you believe this kid based on all the information, your assessments, your professional judgment, everything you have at your disposal, where you believe this kid can go. So it's really, the professionals are driving the bus. What you're doing in terms of sharing with the kid and the family is it's transparency. Saying at this point, can you agree that this is a reasonable thing for you to do? We want you to do those things, and then it's basically who does that. Rates the interim progress. It's got to be the ultimately the responsibility is with the case manager, because that's the person who's managing the case and doing the measurement. The kid will have a voice, obviously. I mean, he says, well, I broke my leg. I couldn't do community service. Well, there's something there, if that makes sense.
I think it does, Doug. I also think it gives you a chance to have a conversation, though, with the young person to say, well, where do you rate yourself on this? Do you think you got it done? Do you think you're at a 1 or a 2 or a 3? And if they're honest, or even if they're flippant, it gives you a chance to have a meaningful dialogue about how you can check yourself to find out if you're meeting goals. Yeah.
And Debbie asked how many goals are too many, and that was one of the, I think we're going to get to that in the next slide, in sort of the FAQs. But again, you want to have a plan that you can achieve. So if you have dozens of things you want to get done, you know the kid, you know what they're capable of. So you have to sort of answer that yourself. But the fewer the better is the rule there.
So before I interrupted you, Doug, you were going to go into talking about some of the things we would use to actually help us individualize this. So these things aren't just kind of pulled out of thin air. We use case management tools to help us figure out what this is, right?
Yeah, and basically the writing action statements, when we talk about it, in this project, and also whenever you're talking about case management and developing a case plan, it's within the context of developing a case plan and your case management tools. And one of the things we try to stress is there are several tools or things, strategies you want to engage in to have a good case plan. So obviously your risk and needs assessment process is important. That's where you're going to identify the the needs and the risks of the kids, so you can actually decide, what you're going to work on, what's most important. And part of that is also going to be a strategy for prioritizing those needs. If any of us get assessed, if all of us get assessed, we're going to find dozens of needs, no matter how normal we are. So you're never going to be able to address all the needs of your kids, and you're going to want to prioritize them. I think the literature suggests that you might want to just limit what you're working on to 3, maybe 4 goals at any given time. Then you're going to develop this comprehensive plan that, and Wendy showed you one version of that plan, but one where you're going to be very specific about, here's our purpose, here are our goals to achieve that purpose, here are the goals the goal domains we're going to work on in this, for this kid, here are the specific objectives that we're going to try to get those, here are the time frames, and this is how we know we're going to measure them, and who's responsible for doing those things. One of the things with the juvenile drug courts is the phase system, and it was sort of new to me. I didn't come from this perspective, and I know where the phase system comes from. It comes from the adult world. I actually understand organizationally why that's important. And one of the confusions we get from a lot of people is, well, are we going to do the case plan, or are we going to do the phase system? I don't really see any. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. The phase system is a way of structuring your program and moving kids from phase 1 to phase 4, or whatever your final phase is. But the case plan is a roadmap for navigating those different phases. So your case plan, can or should be aligned with your phase structure and help define how kids move from phase to phase, what you expect them to achieve in the different phases as they move through the process. Obviously, you're going to be reassessing all the time, clearly from phase to phase, and also with each time you staff the case. And that's where the progress monitoring comes in that we talked about before. You're going to be looking at what type of progress are you making on these goals? Are they still realistic? What can we do to move you on? What incentives do we need to incentivize your behavior? What sanctions might we use? And we want to use those less, obviously. We want to impose that might also move you along for getting to where you want to go. And finally, the case closing, and that's where I think Jessica had mentioned that sort of those proximal goals in terms of what we're trying to achieve on any given case, how successful you were at when you close the case, when you end the case, and achieving your objectives and goals for each individual case. And then those you roll up into your performance measures individually, and then also in an aggregate form for your juvenile drug court.
Well, thank you, Doug. That was a lot of information that we sort of crammed into 15 minutes, but it's useful information, especially writing out the objective statements, which sort of discussed how difficult that was. And when we were in Hawaii and they were actually practicing those, we could see them really thinking about their kids and how they could individualize these their case plans, which they were aligning with their phase system. And that's a really important goal for this team. The one thing we wanted that we imparted to the Hawaii team was that they will have to practice at this, that it probably won't just come easy to them. They will have to actually work at it to get good at it. So that's what they did. When we were there, they practiced that using a case plan or a case study, and they developed several goals and objectives for this particular kid. They turned them in, and we sort of critiqued them for them so that they could continue practicing this, the development of these goals. So when we were there, or when we train about this, and in chat, I can see this sort of popping up, some of these frequently asked questions. You know, who's responsible for this on the team? Would it be the whole team? Who's responsible for completing the contracts or monitoring them? What can I do when there's no progress? And, you know, how many contracts is, you know, the best number to have in place at any one time? So we just sort of popped these up there. We knew we were going to get them, so we weren't ignoring you in chat. We thought we would get to these. I've seen a couple of the questions come up. The team member responsible, really it's going to be the case manager or the probation officer creating these contracts, working with the youth and families, because they're going to have the most time with the kid. I don't think that, you know, you're going to sit around with the team and the prosecutor and the PD is going to help you develop a contract. You're going to work with the youth and family to do this, the case manager, the probation officer, using the information that they have to help construct this, help construct attainable goals that align with your phases. You know, the whole team is going to be aware of this. They're probably going to be aware of progress. They're going to be aware that things are completed or not completed. So that's when they'll come in to this process. But that's really where we see that role coming in. It aligns with a case manager or a probation officer because they're going to be doing most of the work with the kid. And then I'm going to just skip down to the last bullet point because I think it connects with that. How many contracts can be in place at once? And I think that this is really an individual kid issue. I don't think you should make it a standard. The operative word here really is attainable. What's attainable? What can the youth do? Don't put them in place if the kid is moving along and doing very well. If we're thinking about what the research says, you can have three sort of working goals under three domains that are prioritized. Doug spoke a little bit about that. Well, we have one that's sort of already set up. It's just there. It's the treatment domain. We know that they're going to have, they're going to be referred to treatment. There's been an assessment. They're going to be going to do whatever treatment that they should be doing. So if they're doing MRT, if they're doing 7 challenges or MET, CBT, that they're going to be doing that, and that's under that domain. And then maybe you're going to work on something else like school, but you're thinking about the kid, like what can they really work on, where are we at, have we inserted services so that this goal can be attainable. And maybe the issue isn't necessarily school attendance, but they're going to school, but they're not really engaged. So in the contract that we highlighted, maybe that kid's going to school and we don't have an issue with attendance, but we have an issue with engagement. And they don't have enough credits to graduate, and we want to help them get on that road. So while they're in our care, we're going to be helping them figure some of these things out. So that's really a kid issue is what I think those two bullet points are kind of connected. So the other bullet point, who's responsible for completing them? And I sort of touched on that earlier when I said, you know, the youth signs this, the family signs this, and the case manager signs this. And we're all sort of working towards the same goal there, that this needs to be completed. So everybody who signed is accountable. Of course, the youth has to, you know, do the hard work of getting it in. But as a case manager or a family member, you're going to be inserting that support, right? You're going to be monitoring, making sure that stuff gets done. So that's what we mean by who's responsible for getting this done.
Wendy, I'd like to insert something here, interject.
Go right ahead.
This was one of the issues when we developed performance measures for probation in Pennsylvania and in other jurisdictions across the country. and we would bring out the report cards, and we talk about the case management, case planning, and the case closing form. And at some point, invariably, in every workshop we did, among the brightest of the probation officers in there would say, "Hey, wait a second, does this mean you're going to be judging my performance?" And I always had to say, "Yes, and what's wrong with that?" And the answer to that question is, who's responsible for completing the contracts? This is the job of the juvenile drug court. You're the ones who are making up the contracts. You're the one who are helping these kids achieve the goals that you're setting. So it's really your responsibility as a professional. The kid has the responsibility too, but I think it's been mentioned several times. We're the grown-ups here, and so it's sometimes a bitter pill to swallow. But if you make a contract or a case plan for a kid, one of the reasons why it has to be well written and clear and concise and doable is because when all is said and done, people can come back to you and say, "Freddie, none of your case plans are working out. There's something wrong," and you will also be judged by that. So ultimately, the buck stops with us, the professionals.
Right, and I would add.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Wendy.
I would add that I wouldn't be afraid of that. I think Doug threw it out there, and it's important to note, but don't be afraid of the data that comes back. That's why we were sort of harping on this will take practice. You're not just going to go out there and boom, you are the super contract maker. This is going to take practice, but the reason why we, keep this data and review it and are held accountable by our team members is that that's how we can get better. So don't be afraid of sort of being able to judge your own work or have other people help you or critique that work or make that work better, because I think that's an important part of the three-prong approach, where we're taking an honest look at how we're delivering incentives and sanctions, and we're making goals for the team. So a bunch of the onus of this is on the team to do better. But you can't be afraid of that process. You have to welcome it with open arms, because in the end it'll make the juvenile drug court team better, the program better, and get some better outcomes for those kids.
In fact,
go ahead.
I was just going to do real quick. In fact, experience supports exactly what Wendy's saying. People that have done this, jurisdictions that have done this, embrace this, and in fact sometimes can't see themselves not doing this anymore, because everything gets better when you start measuring your own performance.
So the last bullet point that we didn't really address is, what can I do when there's no progress? Because, of course, I think we can all understand that. And just like when in the last webinar when I was talking about the MVP, and I said, of course I don't think you're going to go out there and boom, this is the magic sauce, the magic dust that's going to make everything perfect. So you're going to have some things that you're going to struggle with. There's no progress. You have every week it's not completed. So you're really going to have to think about that. But these are goals and behaviors that we're putting in place where we're really being thoughtful about how we're going to respond. We're connecting it to the behavior. We're making sure that we're being immediate, we're being fair, we're being consistent, and we're being very thoughtful about this process. So with that, we would really think about at any one point, nobody's really come out and asked, but at any one point would non-compliance or no progress equal a time or a day in detention or an afternoon in detention? And I would argue that it probably doesn't. It's not an appropriate response to what we're trying to do. So if we're using detention in a thoughtful way, using it the way that it's designed to think about safety of the kid and community, no progress on these goals doesn't necessarily mean that, because once they've been put into detention, they actually can make no progress on these goals. So it's counterintuitive. So you're going to be very thoughtful about what that progress means, what that no progress means. And Doug had mentioned before, you're going to go back and you're going to look, is this an attainable goal? Is this something that can be accomplished? What haven't I inserted? Maybe something needs to happen before this goal can be put in place. If we've put in place some sort of activity that they have to get to, but then figure out that there's no transportation, then that's a faulty set of activities.
Hey, Wendy, can I chime in for just a minute there?
Go right ahead, Jess. I was just going to ask you if you had any input.
I have two thoughts. And the first is that and it was the thought I brought up earlier. If the young person signs the behavior contract and doesn't complete, it's perfectly okay to do that sanction, because the sanction isn't going to be going to detention, right? It's going to be, your curfew's going to be earlier now. You have to be in at 6 p.m. It's going to be that you're going to freeze your points. It's going to be that you're going to have to sit in the coordinator's office for an hour after court. It's not going to be one of those, it's not going to be something where we all feel icky about doing it. And so that's totally appropriate. If they fail 2 or 3 behavior contracts, that's when you go back to looking at the drawing board at the goal. But it's totally okay to impose the sanction that everybody has agreed to. And then the other point I think that was really vital, and something that you really touched on here, is that when we have kids on probation and when we have kids in drug court, we have goals for them that are not related to delinquency and substance abuse, right? We have goals that are related to things that we would call status offenses, like things like going to school. And if you don't go to school, that's a status offense only, because it's only a problem because you're a kid. And so because we have these goals and we want them to be better when they're done with us in court, we make these plans for them. We want them to go to school. We want them to get involved in pro-social activities. But because it's a court, we get really stuck on that compliance and accountability. So all of a sudden, because they're not meeting these goals, which are kind of enrichment goals in a lot of ways, then we're not sure. We don't know how to respond, because we're like, we told you to do it, now you didn't do it. Now it's undermining our authority. What do we do? And that's why we like the idea of these behavior contracts. It helps us enforce compliance with those enrichment goals without getting to a place where we have to be excessively punitive. And that, I think, is really, really important for drug courts, because I know it's really hard. You don't want to send kids to detention for not going to school. You don't want to send them to detention because they didn't join a basketball league. But when you draw that line in the sand to say you must comply with what I tell you to do, you don't give yourself a lot of room.
Right. That's why it's so important to be thoughtful about how you're going to respond for no progress, for noncompliance, so that, the trick to making these work really well is to be very consistent. So they didn't comply, this happens. And because they don't get to earn points or curfew or the things that we put in place, you can just do it. So with that, we're gonna get to my what, so what, now what. So what did we talk about? We talked a lot about, at the beginning, sort of connecting this second prong to the first prong and the third prong, how this is all these things are connected, how we're trying to build this structure where we're really focused on providing a structure that we can measure, that we can count, that we can provide for more incentives to happen. And the behavior contracts, the second prong, is just it's just the next step in that process. So the first prong, thinking about just that one thing that we want, those clean UAs, and then going a little bit further and thinking about what are all the other things that I want these kids to do and how can I help them do it? That's the what. How can I help these kids do what I want them to do the things that I know are important for them, because like we've kept saying, we're the adults in the room. But so what? What does that mean? I think it really means that when we have these things in place, it becomes a lot easier to decrease that noise, that chatter that we have in that pre-court staffing, that sort of inconsistent decision making where in one case it's this and in another case it's that, and that's where those predetermined requirements sort of they get a little iffy because, like Jessica was saying, there's that line in the sand, and we want to begin by being very constructive. Set this plan. Remember, we plan. We like to construct plans. We like to-do lists. That's what people do. Let's help these young people do that. So that's the so what. But now what? What do you think, and I'm just going to ask you guys to write in chat, and if you were on the webinar last week, what would be the first step in doing this? How would you begin to implement behavior contracts? How would you begin working with these with your court? Just give me one step. Because actually, just like the kids, you're going to have to create a plan to actually implement this, right? You're going to talk about team discussion. That's a good first step. You're going to discuss this webinar, the literature, case planning, SMART goals. You're going to discuss all those things and think about how we're going to put this in place. A needs assessment. Debbie, clarify for me. Needs assessment for the kids or for the team? Open, honest communication with the team. We have a needs assessment in place for the youth to target risk behaviors. That's a good way to find out how you can make some good goals. Work with the team to identify a plethora of less restrictive sanctions. So you sort of have those on hand so the youth can select or choose maybe. Needs assessment needs assessment, risk assessment, using those tools that Doug sort of went through. That's one thing to put in. So this is a good now what. So you're thinking about some things that you're going to do first. Think about what you're going to be putting in place to do this. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask before? We do have some time left that we can address some questions if you have any more specific questions. If we miss any questions in chat, you can chat them again. Jessica, do you have anything to add?
Well, I want to remind folks that we're doing our third prong in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about how the use of points or other kind of program-wide incentives can be used really effectively as incentives or sanctions because, again, if you don't earn points, that means you don't have enough points to buy the prize you want out of the prize vault, or maybe if it's tied to phase movement, you're not able to move phases. And so, again, when we're thinking about like that plethora of least restrictive sanctions, there's a lot of ways to build this into the program that make it so you have a lot of responses and that the young people can really be in charge of their own destinies. You know, they're earning their points, or if they're not, and they say, well, why can't I buy that? You can say you got to earn the points. And you can always put it right back on them.
Right.
They just plug
and
that.
Good plug. But I also want to emphasize when we're thinking of sanctions, spend a lot of time thinking about how you're going to incentivize. So how you're going to get them to do what you want. So you're going to hear me say this a lot you've heard it if you've listened to any of the webinars. You're going to flip that switch. It's how am I going to get them to do what I want? How am I going to engage them? and not pointing the finger at them as you must do this or you'll get in trouble. So you're going to start with, how can I get you to do this? I'd rather you do it. I want to get you to do it. So Debbie, if I'm reading this right, are you having a hard time agreeing on priorities for the team? One thing you can do is you can ask the youth and families what their priorities are, and let them have a choice in that. These should be derived from the case management tools that Doug went through, so you should have some understanding of what domains you're working on, so you can ask the youth and families to chime in about, maybe what their priorities are, what they want to work on. That's one way to settle that. So it looks like we've come to the end of our second prong. And I'm excited for the third prong, and that will be, I'm excited for that it will be the last prong. And I hope that you guys enjoyed the webinar today. We tried to have a guest speaker so you could hear from another expert in the field. I certainly enjoy presenting these ideas to you. It's been exciting to see how much engagement we have throughout this process. And I hope you will all join us for the final webinar to discuss larger program incentives where you're sort of incorporating this whole positive framework, strength-based framework to really get kids and families engaged. So thank you very much. I want to remind everyone that as soon as the webinar closes, a survey will pop up. If you could take a few moments to fill out that survey evaluation, it really helps us target specific critiques to the audience so we can build a better webinar next time. So thank you so much for participating today, and I look forward to working with all of you, training all of you in the future.
Thanks, everybody.